The shuttle bus dropped Adrian at the base of the long stone steps. He tilted his head back, staring up at the hotel that had loomed in his mind for weeks. Photographs online had not done it justice. The Stanley stood like a sentinel against the October sky, its white frame too pristine, its red roof sharp against the clouds. The way it perched on the hillside made it feel less like a retreat and more like a watchtower, gazing endlessly into the valley below. Adrian told himself he had come for quiet, to write, to get away from Denver, from the failed relationship, from the calls he had stopped answering. A historic hotel in the Rockies, he'd told his sister, selling the idea as though it were a normal getaway. He hadn't told her the truth. That solitude sometimes called to him like a voice, one he wasn't sure he wanted to answer. The automatic doors hissed open and warm air wrapped around him. The lobby glowed amber with chandeliers, the scent of old wood and brass pressing in. A fire burned in the hearth, but its warmth felt staged, like an actor smiling too wide. Guests murmured in the lounge, though their voices sounded distant, slightly warped as though heard underwater. The receptionist greeted him with a smile. Her hair was pale, her uniform immaculate. Yet her eyes, they didn't match the rehearsed cheer. They studied him like an old acquaintance whose name hovered just out of reach. "Welcome, sir. Checking in?" Adrian slid his ID across the counter. "Yes, reservation under Ward." "Adrian Ward." Her smile deepened. She didn't glance at the monitor. Instead, she reached below the counter and produced a brass key already waiting on a hook. "Room 217, she said softly, as though repeating a line. "It's been waiting." The words landed strangely. Not ready, not available, but waiting. Adrian forced a polite chuckle. Sounds inviting. Her fingers brushed his as she handed over the key. They were colder than they should have been. "Enjoy your stay, Mr. Ward," she said. "If you need anything at all, we'll know." He blinked. "You'll know?" "Housekeeping always knows," she replied. The smile that followed stretched too far, as though her face strained to hold it. Adrian turned away quickly. The suitcase wheels clattered on marble as he crossed the lobby, past velvet chairs and old paintings. He told himself she was just eccentric, but the words followed him up the stairs like invisible hands tugging at his collar. The grand staircase rose in front of him, banisters gleaming, each step groaning beneath his shoes. Halfway up, he paused and glanced back. The lobby had frozen. The guests no longer murmured. A man lifting a glass seemed paused mid-motion, eyes fixed forward, unblinking. The receptionist sat at her desk, head bowed now, hands folded like a figure at prayer. Adrian rubbed his eyes hard and the world restarted. A woman laughed near the hearth. A door shut. The fire crackled. "Normal!" He swallowed and continued upward. The second-floor corridor stretched long and silent. The carpet swirled in dizzying reds and golds, loops that seemed too elaborate for comfort. The sconces cast weak halos, leaving stretches of shadow in between. Finally, he reached room 217. The brass numbers gleamed faintly as though freshly polished. He hesitated, feeling a drop in temperature the moment he stopped. His breath steamed faintly in the corridor, though no other hallway had been this cold. Behind him, floorboards creaked. Adrian turned sharply. The corridor was empty, silent. The carpet rippled faintly, as though something unseen had shifted its weight just beyond the sconces. He told himself it was fatigue. Thin air, nerves. He slipped the brass key into the lock. It turned with no resistance, smooth, almost eager. Inside, the room smelled of mildew and something faintly sweet, like flowers pressed flat and forgotten in a book. Curtains were drawn against the gray afternoon, the light dim and muted. Adrian set his suitcase on the bed. The springs groaned as though someone had been lying there already. He froze, waiting for the sound to fade. It didn't. It lingered, low and soft, like a sigh exhaled into the mattress. Adrian turned slowly, eyes on the shadows clinging to the corners. The wallpaper was faded, its patterns curling like veins across the plaster. The air pressed in against his lungs. He shut the door quietly behind him. The latch clicked, and with it came another sound, faint but distinct. A whisper. Not a word. Not yet. But the suggestion of breath-forming language. Adrian stood still, his hand on the doorknob. The silence that followed pressed in deeper than the noise. The receptionist's words clung to him, sticky as cobwebs. Room 217 has been waiting. Adrian woke with the sense he'd only skimmed sleep. The ceiling shifted all night, not footsteps, not settling wood, just a patient shifting above him. When gray morning leaked through the curtains, the room felt smaller, air stale with too many breaths. He left his suitcase closed and stepped into the hallway to breathe something that wasn't 217. The door clicked behind him with an intimacy he disliked. The corridor wore its red and gold coils like a spell. Lamps hummed, light the color of old paper. A housekeeping cart waited by the elevator. No staff. He started walking. Coffee, people, daylight. But the carpet loops tugged at his gaze. With each step, the swirls rearranged, pointing ahead, then subtly back. Room 219, room 221. Room 221 again. He doubled back. The numbers corrected themselves, innocent. 3 steps and the hallway stretched, elastic and patient. Perspective, he muttered, just the angle. A quick giggle skipped along the walls. Small feet pattered, then stopped. Adrian followed into a narrower stretch where the red had dulled to rust. "Hello?" he called. "Are your parents around?" Silence held its breath. The giggle returned behind him now, farther away, as if the hall had moved the sound. He turned and saw only the cart and the open elevator. The doors parted with a bell. No one stepped out. He looked in briefly. Mirrors multiplied him. Adrian, 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 each a shade paler than the last. One reflection blinked late. He stepped back and the doors drew shut like lips withholding a secret. He chose the stairs, spiraling down, bleach in the air. At a landing marked L, a service door stood propped with a wedge. He pushed into a corridor narrower than a promise. Here the hotel dropped its mask. Exposed pipes lined the ceiling. A string of bulbs buzzed. A corkboard showed a staff schedule. The dates were right. The names were wrong. At the bottom, in caps, Ward, Adrian, turnover, 217, 3:17 a.m. A brown check mark sat beside it. He lifted a finger, then thought better. A door eased open ahead. He followed into a laundry of tall machines. A radio listed the weather, then listed it backward. He twisted the dial. The voice slid into the wall and kept talking. "Housekeeping," he called. A sheet on a rolling rack lifted, though no air moved. It hovered, then fell again. When he reached out, something brushed his wrist from beneath the linen. Swift, cold, the weight of a small hand withdrawing. Hangers chimed. He backed away. Right. Then right again should have returned him to the main hall. It did and didn't. He emerged into a corridor with the same carpet and lamps, but colder air. Every door stood slightly ajar, as if the hall had taken a long breath. "Hello?" he tried, whispering now. From one room, a voice answered, his own. "Just go back," it said, weary. "You know where you belong." Adrian stepped closer. He pushed the nearest door wider. The room inside was identical to 217. An open suitcase sat on the bed, his suitcase. A folded shirt lay on top, creased exactly as he would. On the nightstand, a brass key rested on a coaster. He picked it up, heart racing. 17. He stared into the hall, empty. He shut the suitcase, pocketed the key, left the door ajar. Stairs, lobby, people, he told himself. The carpet seemed to spin beneath him, drawing him inward. Lamps hummed in sympathetic chorus. At the next junction, a brass plaque offered lobby, stairwell. He followed, with relief so sudden it stung. The stairwell gaped, concrete and echoing. The rail was slick with condensation, as if a mouth had been breathing there. He took one step down. In the quiet below, something knocked once, polite as a guest. He froze. The knock came again, then a soft chain rattle. No door was visible, only landings and more landings. Yet the knock felt positioned at his chest, as if the space had reached the next beat of a ritual. "Not for me," he said, and climbed back up. The door's little window was dark as an eye. He pushed through into light that no longer felt warm. He didn't need numbers to know where 217 was. The hall had arranged a red-gold runway back to the door that would end his wandering. He walked quickly, trying not to run. At 217, he checked the threshold for shadows, found none, and slipped inside. The room received him with tender staleness. The curtains did not stir. The mattress remembered his weight. From the hall came a third knock, decorous and inevitable. Adrian closed his eyes, listening. The sound was not at his door. It traveled along the corridor, pausing outside every room in turn. He waited for it to pass. It did not. It arrived. He opened his eyes to the brass numbers in his palm and thought of the schedule. The clock lurched from 3:16 to 3:17 with a click soft as a fingernail on wood. "Housekeeping," said the woman on the other side, cheerful and wrong. "We know what you need." Adrian pressed his ear to the wood. On the other side, the cheerful voice waited like a held breath. A third knock, polite to the point of menace. He set the brass key on the nightstand as though that would convince the hotel he belonged to nothing. "Housekeeping," the woman repeated. "We know what you need." He did not answer. The knocks continued down the corridor, door by door, then away. Silence followed, crowded with listening. Adrian turned on the lamp. The yellow shade made the room feel sepia, like a memory that didn't want to be remembered. He parted the curtains an inch. The glass shivered with wind. He took stock. Chair, desk, dresser, wardrobe, bathroom to the left. Complimentary stationery embossed, the Stanley. A fountain pen lay beside it, uncapped, ink dark as if freshly stirred. He picked up the pen, intending a note to tether him to ordinary things. The nib kissed the paper and bled a word without his help. Ward. He jerked back. The letters were his hand. He turned the page. Its underside carried faint indentations, the ghost of a sentence pressed there. He held the top page to the lamp until the indent reappeared. "Room 217 has been waiting." He put the pen down carefully. "It's a trick," he said to the lamp, to the patient walls. He opened the wardrobe. Inside hung empty wooden hangers, their hook eyes glinting. One began to sway, a pendulum without a clock. He steadied it. When he turned away, the mirror in the door showed it resuming a slow, soundless arc. He shut the wardrobe and checked the bathroom. Tiles white as teeth, a clawfoot tub with a pale ring. Porcelain handles labeled hot and cold. The sea rubbed thin, so it read old. He ran the water. It came reluctantly, first brown, then clear, and too cold for anything living. Steam drifted anyway, as if the room imposed its own temperature. Something tapped in the wall behind the tub. Pipe knock, he told himself, though the rhythm felt conversational. Tap pause. Tap tap. He shut off the water. The drain gurgled longer than physics permitted, as if the pipe led not down, but somewhere elongated and hungry. The mirror above the sink wore a haze of age. He leaned closer. His face hovered a fraction second out of time. He stepped back before the thought finished forming. Back in the room, his suitcase had migrated a foot toward the door. He watched it. It did not continue. He towed it back flush with the bed frame, then centered it on the rug. The room phone rang. He stared at it as at a creature. Adrian lifted the receiver. Static rushed in. "Front desk?" His own voice answered, breath smudged. "Front desk." "Who is this?" "You are," his voice said. "Room 217 has been waiting." The line clicked, like a fingernail on the switch, and the dial tone fell into a sigh so intimate he set the receiver down as if laying a head to sleep. He paced the strip of floor between bed and window, counting steps, marking boards that creaked. He spoke the banalities of sanity under his breath. Weather, itinerary, toothpaste, sandbags against a flood. His breath fogged the window. Letters formed where condensation met cold glass. He wiped them away before they completed his name. He tried the television, a square embedded in polished wood. It stayed black, but the glass caught the room in miniature. In that reflection, the shade was slightly crooked. He straightened the real shade. In the reflection, it did not move. He held still until the image corrected itself with tiny reluctance. Something settled beneath the bed, a shift of fabric. A hand smoothing a wrinkle. He lifted the dust ruffle. Darkness met him, textured like breath on velvet. He pushed his phone's flashlight under. Its beam flattened at the edge, as if the space refused depth. Nothing. Yet a gaze slid across his knuckles, patient and unafraid. He lay on the coverlet and stared at the ceiling. Above the chandelier medallion, the plaster bore faint concentric circles, an old repair or a target. He heard faint music that could have been a piano, one note repeating the way a thought repeats to insist it matters. The doorknob turned. It did not open. It only rotated to the polite limit of its arc and returned to center. He watched brass cool from the warmth of that touch. No shuffle of feet. Whoever stood there agreed to wait until he invited them, or forgot the difference between invitation and surrender. Adrian left the lamp on. He drew the curtains tighter. He placed the key on the nightstand, but its silhouette on the wood looked like the skeleton of a smaller hand. He pulled back the cover and slid beneath, shoes still on, telling himself he would only rest his eyes. The mattress accepted him with a sigh he could not locate. His breath synchronized with the room's, then strayed, then found it again. The last thing he saw before sleep was the bathroom door, ajar by a patient inch, waiting not to startle, but to agree with him about what came next. Adrian dreamed, but the dream did not feel his. He was standing in the hallway outside room 217, yet it was wrong. Elongated, the carpet bleeding its colors into slow rivulets, red threading into gold until the pattern resembled veins beneath pale skin. Every door stood ajar a sliver, as though every guest had leaned out an inch, listening. He heard whispers moving through the cracks, not words, breath. Like a secret rehearsed in 100 mouths. He tried to walk, but the carpet clung. Each step dragged. His shoes sank deeper, as if the floor wanted him beneath it. When he looked down, he saw shapes shifting in the weave, faces almost, open mouths forming silent syllables that dissolved back into curls of fabric. Then came the knock. From his left, one door rattled. From his right, another. The sound traveled down the hall like a sequence, one after another, until it reached him. Room 217 pulsed like a living lung. The brass numbers glowed faintly, wet with condensation. The knock came from inside. His chest tightened. He reached for the knob, though he did not want to. His hand seemed borrowed, a puppet's limb tugged by invisible strings. The knob turned. The door opened onto a room with no floor. Only void, black, endless, humming faintly like power lines stretched across a desert. The bed floated a few feet above nothingness, its sheets pulled taut. On the coverlet lay his suitcase already open. Clothes arranged neatly, though he had never unpacked. And on the pillow, a figure. It resembled him. Same jaw, same eyes, though its skin was pale, almost translucent. Veins blue like watercolor. Its lips moved, but no sound came. The silence pressed against his ears until they ached. The figure sat up, slowly, precisely, and smiled with his teeth. Adrian tried to step back, but the void had gravity. It pulled. His hands gripped the door frame until the wood splintered. The other Adrian extended a hand, palm pale, nails darkened as though bruised. "Come back," the twin mouthed. The void swelled, sucking light from the corridor. The whispers inside the other rooms sharpened into words. He could not catch them all, but he knew some. Stay, trade, remember, belong. The double leaned closer, its eyes hollowed, sockets dark caverns swallowing its gaze. Its smile stretched too far. The door slammed. Adrian awoke, breath torn from him. Room 217, the real one. Lamp still lit, curtains still drawn, but the bathroom door was now fully open. He hadn't touched it. The tub was filling itself. Water hammered against porcelain. He stood, shaking, and crept forward. Inside the tub was no water, only black liquid, thick as tar, rising steadily, though no faucet turned. Its surface trembled like it breathed. The smell was metallic, like rust scraped from deep pipes. He staggered back, nearly tripping over his suitcase. The phone rang again, once. Only once. "Sharp, final." He did not answer. Adrian pressed both hands to the wall to steady himself. The wallpaper felt warm, too warm. He pulled back and saw the floral design swell outward as though the wall inhaled. The flowers on the print seemed to bend toward him, their painted petals curling wetly. He whispered, "I'm not dreaming." The wall whispered back, his own voice muffled. He staggered to the bed, sat down, pressing his palms to his temples. He tried to count, tried to anchor himself, but the numbers tangled. 2 after 3, 5 after 1. His mind skipped like a broken record. The room groaned. Above him, the plaster circle around the chandelier began to rotate, slowly, almost imperceptibly. The faint piano note returned, echoing from nowhere. One key struck again and again, a reminder or a command. The air thickened. Adrian closed his eyes. But the darkness behind them was worse. Faces pressed against the black, dozens, all pale, all familiar in some wrong way. His own face multiplied, repeating in silent judgment. He opened his eyes and whispered to the room, What do you want from me?" The lamp flickered, and for just a second the answer came in the same voice he'd heard on the phone. "You!" He clutched the bed frame, trying to pull himself upright, but the room tilted. Not the way a dream shifted, more like the walls themselves leaned in. The ceiling arched downward, pressing lower, and the chandelier swayed above him, its crystals clinking like teeth. Shadows gathered in the corners, not shapes, not quite, more like stains that decided to move, spreading inch by inch toward him. The wallpaper flowers peeled away and fell in clumps, but the petals did not land. They hovered midair, trembling like insects, wings buzzing faintly. One petal touched his wrist. Warm, wet, alive. Adrian jerked back, and the petal dissolved into ash that smeared across his skin. The shadows pressed closer. The phone rang once more. This time it did not stop. Adrian barely slept after the walls began to whisper back. When morning came, the light through the curtains was weak and jaundiced, as though the sun itself had dimmed in fear of room 217. He rose from the bed unsteady, his body heavy with a dread that felt older than his own bones. The hallways in daylight pretended at normalcy. Carpets glowed with muted color, brass lamps hummed faintly, and faint music trickled from hidden speakers. But Adrian saw what others ignored. Shadows that stayed too long against the wall. Shapes half-formed in the patterns of the carpet. Eyes that winked open only when he wasn't looking directly at them. Down the grand staircase he went, his footsteps swallowed by the wide lobby. Chandeliers trembled slightly, although no wind touched them. He felt watched, but by what he could not tell. And then, at the far side, by the glass doors leading to the veranda, he saw her, the woman in white. She stood impossibly still back toward him, long gown flowing as though under water. Her black hair cascaded to her waist, each strand sharp and too distinct as if carved from shadow. Around her the air rippled, the world bending as though resisting her presence. Adrian froze. Guests wandered by, families, couples, businessmen. None looked at her. A man in a gray suit brushed right past, his shoulder cutting through her veil of hair. He didn't flinch, didn't pause. She did not move. She was not seen. Adrian blinked, and suddenly she was at the foot of the stairs. Staring, her face blurred as though waterlogged, shifting features melting and reforming, never still. But her eyes were sharp, black wells that gave nothing back. Staring into them was like leaning over a pit with no bottom. His throat closed. His hands clamped the banister. "You're not real," he whispered, but the words felt like lies spoken for no one's comfort. Her head tilted, slow and unnatural, a movement that suggested something learning the idea of human gestures rather than knowing them. Then, with a deliberate slowness, she lifted one hand. Her finger pointed upward, not at him, but past him. Toward room 217, Adrian's gut twisted. The woman receded, dissolving into ripples, until nothing remained but the faint outline of her absence. The lobby seemed to breathe again. Yet Adrian could not. He stumbled through the glass doors to the veranda, gulping the cold air of the mountains. The range stretched endless, snow-dusted and sharp, ancient in its silence. For a heartbeat he felt small, yet safe. Surely outside the air was clean, untouched by whatever haunted the hallways. But then he turned toward the glass doors. And in the reflection, she stood behind him. Closer this time. Her blurred face hovered at his shoulder, her mouth twitching. The twitch widened, pulling impossibly far, tearing her jaw from ear to ear in silence. Adrian spun around. Nothing. Only the veranda empty and still. When he looked back at the glass, the reflection showed only him. His chest rose and fell in frantic rhythm. He pressed his forehead against the pane, begging for the cold. But instead of chill, the glass pulsed, thick and soft beneath his skin, like the beat of some hidden organ. And in the reflection, she leaned forward. Her hair brushed his neck in the mirror world, though no touch reached him. Her lips pressed to his ear. A whisper echoed, not through air, but through bone. "You shouldn't have come." The voice wasn't entirely female. It wasn't entirely one voice. It layered, echoing a chorus of warnings woven together. Adrian reeled backward, crashing into the veranda railing. The drop below gaped white with jagged stone teeth, and for one horrible instant, he imagined himself falling, welcomed into the mouth of the mountains. He clutched the rail until his fingers ached, forcing breath back into his lungs. When he looked again, the reflection had normalized. Just him, alone, but the silence was heavier than before. He knew she hadn't left. She was waiting, upstairs near his room. Room 217 had become a promise, a destination marked not by doors, but by inevitability. And though his body resisted, his feet began to turn back toward the stairs. Each step echoed hollow, as though the building itself anticipated his return. He thought he heard laughter drifting from above, faint and brittle. But when he stopped, the sound stopped too. The air smelled faintly of iron, of something rusted yet fresh. His palms were slick with sweat. But when he wiped them against his trousers, faint gray dust clung there, as though he had touched ancient stone instead of polished railings. At the base of the staircase, he hesitated. His reflection in the glass doors behind him still lingered at the edge of his vision. He dared not look back, afraid it would no longer be his reflection at all. And somewhere beyond the silence, he thought he heard her voice again, soft, distant, waiting. Adrian returned to the second floor with footsteps that no longer felt like his own. Each sound from his shoes seemed hollow, distant, as though the floorboards carried not just his weight, but the weight of something trailing him. The hallway ahead was empty, but the sconces along the wall sputtered with anemic light. The yellow glow stretched shadows into broken fingers across the carpet. Room 217 waited at the far end. Its brass number glimmered even in the weak light, brighter than the others, as though the door itself wanted to be seen. Adrian slowed, fighting the compulsion to approach, but the hall seemed longer with every step, pulling him closer no matter how carefully he tried to resist. He stopped just short of the door. His breath clouded in the air, though the hallway was warm. The handle gleamed, polished, untouched, waiting. He reached for it without thinking, hand trembling, heart hammering in his throat. His fingers brushed the brass, cold, unnaturally so. The knob refused to turn. Locked, Adrian sagged with a mixture of relief and disappointment. Some part of him had expected the door to swing wide open, swallowing him whole. Yet the lock's refusal felt worse. It meant something was inside, something that knew he was here and chose to wait. He pressed his ear to the wood. At first there was nothing, only silence. Then faint, a drip, slow, methodical. Like water falling from a great height into a pool far below. He held his breath, listening. The drip grew louder, closer, until it sounded as though the water was falling just behind the thin barrier of the door. Adrian jerked back. The carpet beneath his shoes squelched. He looked down. A dark patch spread outward from the base of the door. Thick liquid seeped into the fibers, too dark to be water, too viscous to be innocent. The coppery stench rose at once, filling his lungs, making his stomach churn. Blood. It oozed from the crack under the door, inching toward him. He stumbled back, but the flow followed, slow and steady, a creeping tide that ignored gravity. It climbed the fibers of the carpet like veins crawling outward. Adrian staggered against the wall. "This isn't real," he whispered. The words rang hollow. His shoes were already stained. The blood darkened the laces, soaked through his socks, clung to his skin with impossible warmth. He shut his eyes, forced himself to breathe, forced himself to count. 1, 2, 3, open. The hallway was clean. No stain, no smell, only carpet, pristine and soft beneath his shoes. But the door was gone. Room 217 had vanished. The brass numbers that gleamed seconds ago were nowhere. Only smooth wallpaper stretched where the door should be, seamless, as though it had never existed. Adrian's throat tightened. He ran his hands over the wall, frantic, searching for the seam. There was nothing, no hinge, no handle, no crack, just endless patterned wallpaper, mocking him. Behind him, the hallway whispered. A low murmur swelled, dozens of voices layered together, some male, some female, some broken and childlike. They spoke at once, words too tangled to distinguish, yet their cadence rose and fell like a chant. Adrian pressed against the wall, trembling. His own name surfaced among the noise. Adrian, over and over, hissed and crooned and begged. He turned. The hallway stretched impossibly long now. The sconces flickered. And at the far end, a figure stood. Not the woman in white. This one was taller, broader, draped in shadows that clung like armor. Its head scraped the ceiling, yet it bent forward, peering at him with an eyeless face. The chanting grew louder, as though spilling from its unseen mouth. Adrian bolted. His shoes pounded against the carpet as he ran toward the stairwell. The voices chased him, hissing his name, promising things he couldn't understand. His pulse thundered, drowning reason, until he nearly slammed into the railing at the end of the hall. He glanced back. The figure was gone. Only silence remained, heavy and complete. Yet when he looked again at the wall where room 217 had been, the brass numbers had returned. The door stood waiting, untouched, as though nothing had changed, and this time the handle slowly turned on its own. The creak echoed far too loud for a simple hinge, reverberating like a groan through the entire corridor. Adrian's stomach twisted. He felt the sound not only in his ears, but deep inside his chest, vibrating against his bones. His knees weakened, body urging him to flee. Yet his gaze remained locked on the slow, deliberate turn of brass. A sliver of darkness appeared in the frame, deeper than shadow, a blackness so dense it seemed to breathe. From within, something shifted, a rustle, a scrape, as though fingernails dragged lightly across wood. Adrian stepped back once, twice, heart battering his ribs. The opening widened another inch, sighing as though the room exhaled. The door was inviting him, or warning him. He could no longer tell which. The door opened as if tugged by a tide. Adrian watched the dark inside flex and settle. A slow inhalation. The knob stilled. Wire-taut silence followed. He told himself to step away. Instead, he stepped in. Air inside was colder, smelling of old soap and damp cloth, a metallic tang like coins on the tongue. The room wore his belongings where he'd left them, almost. The lamp sat an inch to the left. The chair angled inward. The suitcase open with shirts folded in a style he never used, as if someone had rebuilt his life from memory. He reached back. The door nudged itself shut. The latch clicked, polite and final. The phone on the nightstand breathed. It didn't ring. It sighed through the coiled cord. He lifted the receiver. Silence poured in, heavy as frost. Far away, a single piano note bent out of tune. He set it down. "What do you want?" From the bathroom, the drip. A steady metronome counting time he hadn't granted. He crossed the carpet. The bathroom door stood ajar. He pushed it with 2 fingers. The tub brimmed with black water that refused to reflect him. It held the room behind him, bed, lamp, suitcase, but no man. Ripples stitched the surface and traveled toward the drain, as if inward were the only direction. On the mirror, steam cleared in an oval, the memory of a face. In the oval, condensation traced 4 letters. U. The word smeared, reformed, steadied. He backed out and caught his heel on a loose thread that hadn't been there. He tugged. The carpet tugged back, gentle as a dog at a sleeve. He pulled free and reached the bed. The suitcase had grown an envelope beneath his shirts, sealed with dark wax. No stamp, no address. Only his name, Adrian, written in his hand. He did not remember writing it. He did not doubt that he had. Inside, a photograph. The second-floor hall outside room 217, the carpet pattern and brass sconces, the mountain in the far window. In the center stood a man with his back to the camera. Black suit, dark hair, familiar shoulders. A gray timestamp burned in the corner, a date decades before he was born. A single paper unfolded. When it knocks, let it in. He looked again at the photo. The man had turned a fraction, as if reacting to a sound. The timestamp hadn't changed, only the posture. A knock came, soft and courteous, from inside the closet. He crossed to it. The brass knob pulsed under his palm. "Who's there?" No answer, just a hanger scraping along its pole. He opened the door. Coat swung without draft. His conference suit swayed among them as if thinking. A pair of black shoes he didn't own waited on the floor, half a size too large. He touched one, warm. Between the coats, something moved in the shape of absence. He pushed them apart. The back panel was not wood, but mirror. It reflected the room in perfect detail except for one omission. The closet in the reflected room held no Adrian. He lifted a hand. The reflection lagged a second, then matched him. He pressed his fingertips to the glass. It yielded, cool and damp. Behind him, the phone clicked. Someone, him, answered from the nightstand. "What do you want from me?" The lamp flickered. From the bathroom came a bright drop. "You." His shoulders lowered in recognition. The tub's surface rose a fraction and held. The metronome drip quickened. He stood in the doorway and studied the water that would not give his image back. Earlier, it had felt like threat. Now it resembled passage. He rolled his sleeves without knowing why. The photograph lay face down. The mirror kept its message. "You." The O widened into a mouth. He put one foot over the tub. The air above was colder, the surface humming. Voices braided thin within it. Stay, trade, remember, belong. His toes touched. Not liquid, not solid, an accepting pressure, like darkness receiving a thought. A knock rattled the corridor door. 3 polite taps. Adrian froze, ankle sinking without sinking. The handle twitched. On the counter, the note waited. When it knocks, let it in. He drew his foot out and crossed the room. The knocking did not hurry. He placed his hand on cool brass, hesitated at the fisheye blur in the peephole, and turned the latch. Empty hallway, carpet, sconces, mountain framed like a painting. Movement brushed his periphery, a suggestion of guidance, the way a host steers a guest with 2 fingers at the elbow. The understanding arrived wordless. The knock had never come from the hall. It had come from the mirror. He shut the door and faced the bathroom. "All right," he told the room that wanted him. "I'm listening." The phone breathed. The tub steadied. The word on the mirror softened at the edges, smiling without shape. He took one more step toward the water that was not water, and the unseen metronome clicked once, as if something had started counting down. The click from nowhere paced the room like a slow heartbeat. Adrian stood between door and bathroom, a fulcrum for 2 kinds of dark, the honest blank of the hallway and the tub's black that wanted him. With each click, silence felt skimmed off the air. "Terms," he said, the word arriving as if supplied. Steam thinned on the mirror, the oval cleared, a face-shaped absence. New letters grew beneath the old demand, beating into shape. Trade. He remembered the whispers braided in the water. Stay, trade, remember, belong. What do I give, what do I get? A ripple traveled across the tub and reached the rim without spilling. The mirror tightened at the edges, as if squinting, and wrote, "Room." It erased itself and returned, "Form." He looked at his hands, the crescent of dried blood from the snagged thread, the proof of being a single thing. He pressed his palm to the glass. It cooled the skin and something beneath it. His reflection arrived a half-beat late, then hurried to match, like a clerk flipping for a file labeled Adrian and almost missing. The envelope waited on the counter. Its seal had mended on its own. The stamp in the wax was no longer his initials, but a small, perfect circle, the O in you. He slid the photograph free. The second-floor hallway. Brass sconces, mountain framed in the window. At center, a suited man with his back turned, familiar shoulders. The faded timestamp insisted on a date before he existed. The paper felt older than it should. On the back, a pencil line had bloomed. A door is a debt with a hinge. Tick, tick, tick. He pictured a ledger humming through the hotel. People on one side, rooms on the other, balances settled nightly. He also pictured the lake he'd tried to keep for a mind and how easily its edges failed here. "If I give you my form," he told the tub, "what do I get?" The fog on the mirror trembled, then set the answer. Place. "Belonging," he whispered, and the chandelier chimed as if in weather. The coats in the closet aligned themselves with a polite scrape. The phone clicked twice, practicing a mouth. He set the photograph on the counter face up and rolled his sleeves, the gesture of a man about to accept an obvious job. "Show me the cost." The bathroom dimmed by agreement. The black water began to mimic him. Not him exactly, but a figure wearing his outline wrong. Shoulders a degree too square, a patient habit to the mouth. When he lifted his left hand, it raised its right. Footsteps passed in the hall and stopped outside his door. No handle turned. The presence let him feel it and made him be the one to decide. "If I step in," he said, "what leaves in my place?" The mirror breathed the banal truth. "You." "But which?" he asked. The letters faltered and did not answer. The click felt closer. The ceiling's ring of light looked like a clock without hands. He thought of the woman in white pointing him back here, of the mountain he'd begged for proof, of his suitcase, rearranged by something that knew where his shirts belonged. He put both hands on the tub's rim. The surface flexed, greeting, paper rasped. He turned. The photograph had changed without ceremony. The suited man now faced the camera. It was his face and not, older in one way, younger in another, linked by the airport fatigue he knew. The timestamp remained impossible. In the margin, a thin gray line appeared where no printer should place it, a hinge. The note below had rewritten itself, surer hand, "When it knocks, you are the door." He laughed once, small and wrong. The room absorbed it kindly. "Terms," he said. "I accept." He did not climb in. He pinched the photograph and lowered it to the water. The surface reached, tasting rather than wetting. The paper slid through the black and was gone. The tub darkened by a shade. The click stopped, as if two counts, his and the hotel's, had quietly aligned at 0. The mirror's oval cleared, no letters. It showed him as he stood, and just late enough to prove there was another, the version that belonged here. It wasn't a request, it was a permission. Adrian pressed his palm to the mirror. It took his hand like skin. "Then open," he said. Something did. The mirror did not open. It thinned. Adrian felt the room draw a long breath through him, as if his ribs were the gap. He leaned forward without leaning, and the surface rose to meet him like a patient's brow meeting a hand. Consenting, cool. The room behind him tightened. Corners stood up. The chandelier found a new hum. He rubbed it, no complaint. "Which of us knocks?" he asked the mirror. The answer rose through bone. "You both do. Only one is answered." He stepped back. The mirror did not tug. It attended. At the peephole, the corridor curved in miniature. Runner, sconces, no one. And still he felt a courteous hand at his back, ready to guide. He opened the door a crack. Hotel air slid under, neutral and cool. Ice rattled somewhere distant. Nothing moved. He closed the door. The latch accepted a final click that sounded willing to be revised. His suitcase had shut itself. A new lock wore the same neat O as the mended wax. He did not try it. Opening would only confirm what he had agreed to. Fog returned at the mirror's edges and slowly closed inward. Letters wrote and unwrote until one remained, host. Host to what? The mirror borrowed him. The reflected Adrian framed a space as if measuring a painting, then stepped aside to reveal nothing. Not emptiness, an invitation shaped like a silhouette. The tub's surface darkened, approving. A knock pressed into the bones of the room. The elevator chimed after it, respectful. He felt himself scheduled, slotted where a name used to be. At the window, the mountain remained, patient as geology. Yet the glass now held a smudge, a faint rectangle in the sky, darker than dark, like a far window open onto an unlit room. The curtain stirred and exhaled detergent and dust. He let it fall and faced the mirror. "Then we host," he said. The mirror offered no word. The tub held still. Only the phone breathed and the chandelier ticked. He returned to the chair and folded his hands like a candidate waiting to be called. Time thinned. He learned to follow the click down through the floor to a housekeeping key kissing a door. He felt the awning gather weather. He noticed how near his body lay to the latch and how neatly the room wore his shape, trying him on for fit. The fog cleared at last. The oval was gone. In its place hovered a small circle, faint as a shy moon. He waited for letters. None came. He stood and set his hand on the latch. He did not move it. He was the door. The knowledge slid into his shoulders and took a seat. "Knock," he said. Not request or dare, but acknowledgement. The sound arrived from everywhere at once, courteous as a gloved hand. The tub accepted the echo. The photograph breathed, pleased to be included. Adrian drew a slow breath, feeling the hinge find its center. He turned the latch and did not open. He closed his eyes and felt someone on the other side do the same. Two matched motions, no gap. For a heartbeat, he believed the rest of the hotel was doing it too. room after room aligning in a long, invisible corridor. Adrian did not remember standing, yet he found himself at the door, palm already flat against the wood as if answering a summons he had not heard. The latch yielded without protest this time, and the corridor stretched before him like a stage lit for no audience. It looked correct at first. The patterned runner, the brass sconces, the identical doors with numbers that meant little. But the further his eyes traveled, the more the corridor lengthened, not in a way of distance, but of refusal. Each door receded as he watched, as if politely declining his approach. He stepped out. The carpet sighed beneath his shoes, grateful or warning. Behind him, his own door shut with a hush that felt permanent. The corridor inhaled him. The lights hummed overhead. The pattern of sconces doubled, then tripled. He passed door 217, then 218. But when he glanced back, 217 was gone. Only 215 remained, and it blinked as though embarrassed to be caught lying. Adrian slowed his pace. His breathing did not follow him. It stayed behind, clinging to the vanished door, so that each inhale arrived late, muffled as though through cotton walls. He pressed a hand to his chest. His heart beat obediently, but distant, as though the rhythm belonged to another body further down the hall. He continued walking. The air cooled by fractions, like a thermometer lowering itself in increments too polite to alarm. The rug's pattern repeated, diamonds, lines, diamonds, lines, until he realized each repeat grew a little sharper, like a stencil etched deeper into reality. At door 229, a sound whispered, a knock. He froze. It was gentle, like fingertips against his own sternum, heard more than heard. He leaned toward the door. "The peephole was black. Who knocks?" he whispered. The peephole blinked open, his eye staring back at him. But older, weary, as though that version had been waiting longer than patience should allow, he staggered back. The corridor compensated. It swayed and straightened like a courteous usher pretending nothing unusual had happened. He tried another door, 30. The handle was warm, alive. He turned it. The door opened a crack, revealing not a room but the same hallway, reversed, waiting like a mirror too tired to shine. His reflection was not there. Only absence stood, shaped like him but vacant, breathing without lungs. He closed it quickly. The handle trembled in his grip, eager to reopen, but he let go and hurried forward. The hallway thinned. The ceiling stooped. The sconces sagged closer. He brushed one with his shoulder and felt it throb like flesh. He pressed onward until the air itself thickened, as if he walked through syrup, each step pulling memory from his muscles. "Am I walking?" he asked aloud. "Or am I being walked?" The corridor answered by shortening. Ahead, a turn appeared, impossible, sudden. The carpet curved like a grin. Adrian took it too quickly, desperate. The new hallway was smaller. 3 doors only, 301, 302, 303. He knew instinctively none had existed before. Each number shone faintly, not brass, but something wet, glistening. He chose 302. His hand shook on the knob. When he turned it, the knob dissolved, crumbled like sugar in rain. The door opened anyway. Inside was not a room, but an emptiness shaped like a lung, breathing. The air pulsed inward and outward. It smelled faintly of lilac and iron. A voice came from nowhere, gentle, precise. "You are late." He stepped back, heart hammering, though the beat again seemed behind him, chasing from some other corridor. "You've mistaken me," he said. "Not mistaken," the voice replied. Replaced, the door swung wider of its own accord. The emptiness beckoned like a waiting mouth. Adrian saw the faint outline of a chair inside, and upon it, a figure, himself, already seated, hands folded, waiting with patient vacancy. He slammed the door shut. The hallway dimmed. The numbers vanished from the doors. Only blank wood remained. He turned, intending to run back the way he came. But the corridor was gone, only wall. The carpet curled up against the wall like fabric being tucked. The sconces extinguished themselves one by one until only the dim glow from under door 302 remained. His hand rose without his permission. It hovered inches from the knob. He tried to pull back, but the corridor leaned him forward. "Not yet," he whispered, though he did not know to whom. The door listened. It pulsed once, like a waiting heart, then stilled. The glow under it dimmed. Adrian realized the corridor had shortened further. There were no other exits, only this one door waiting. Somewhere behind the walls, an elevator chimed. Floor unknown, call unanswered. He closed his eyes and whispered, "If I open it, do I leave or arrive?" The silence that followed felt like agreement. Adrian's hand still hovered near the knob of door 302 when the hallway changed its breath. The silence, once compact, thinned into a draft that smelled faintly of lilac, but sharper now, almost bitter, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. He turned his head. At the far end of the hall, where there had been only blank wall, a figure now stood. She wore white. The dress was not luminous, but pale enough that the shadows of the corridor seemed to step back and make room. Her face was hidden in the veil of her own stillness. She did not walk. She advanced the way memory does. One blink and she was closer. Adrian pressed his back to door 302. His throat locked on his breath. The woman raised her head slowly, and though her features remained blurred by distance, he felt her gaze land squarely on him, fastening like a clasp. "You—" The word escaped him before thought. He had seen her in the mirror's fog, at the corner of his room, in the scent that haunted the bathtub. Always peripheral, never so close. She tilted her head. The corridor listened for him to continue. "What do you want?" His voice cracked against the walls, thin as paper. The woman's dress rustled, though she did not move. The sound was oceanic, a tide rolling through narrow halls, the air chilled. Behind him, the door pulsed faintly as if echoing her heartbeat. "You've kept my room," a voice said, not through lips. Through the walls, the carpet, through the space behind his ribs. Adrian shook his head. "I don't belong to this place." Her veil shifted, showing the faintest edge of her jaw, pale as marble. Belonging isn't asked, it's assigned. She lifted a hand. The lights above them dimmed in sequence, each one bowing out until only the glow beneath door 302 remained. Her finger pointed at it. "No," Adrian said, though he could not explain whether he denied her the door or himself. The woman stepped closer. This time he saw her bare feet sink slightly into the carpet, as though the fabric absorbed her like sand. With each step, the corridor shortened, folding behind her, erasing the space Adrian might have used to flee. "Stay back," he whispered. The woman stopped, not out of mercy but inevitability. Her hands fell to her sides. The scent of lilac thickened until it clogged his throat, until breathing meant swallowing her presence. She spoke again, and this time the voice threaded directly into his skull. "Every guest checks out. But some leave the body behind like luggage unclaimed. Someone must tend to it, someone must host." Adrian pressed harder against the door at his back. "I won't." Her head turned slowly, as though considering whether refusal was possible. Then she stepped closer again, dissolving the space between them. The hallway groaned. The walls pulled inward, narrowing until his shoulders brushed both sides. He was trapped between her advance and the door's waiting pulse. The woman halted just before him. Her veil stirred in the unseen draft. Through it, he glimpsed eyes not dead, not alive, but searching. They did not demand, they evaluated. "Why me?" he asked. Her voice came soft but unyielding. "Because you arrived late. Delay is permission." His chest tightened. He thought of the missed buses, the waiting, the feeling of always being the one left in the terminal when the last departure vanished. The woman reached out. Her hand hovered inches from his chest, not touching, but drawing the heat out of him. His breath fogged, his heart stuttered, beating not for him, but for the corridor. Behind him, the door clicked open by a fraction, spilling a glow that illuminated nothing except his own shadow bending toward the threshold. Adrian trembled. "If I step inside, I won't return." The woman inclined her head in confirmation, or perhaps in blessing. "No one returns, they only continue." Her hand moved closer. He braced, expecting cold. Instead, warmth seeped into him, deep and invasive, like being filled with someone else's memory. He saw flashes, other men and women sitting where he had sat, staring into mirrors that watched back, whispering promises they did not intend to keep. The warmth withdrew. She lowered her hand. "Choose," she said. "The hall cannot wait longer." Adrian looked at the narrowing space, at the pulsing glow of door 302, then back at her unmoving form. The scent pressed around him until thought thinned. He whispered, "And if I don't?" The woman's veil fluttered. Her face finally came into focus. Not monstrous, not kind, but exact, as if she were an image sharpened beyond comfort. "Then the hotel will choose for you," she said. The walls creaked, shifting closer. The corridor tilted like a throat preparing to swallow. Adrian closed his eyes, hands slipping toward the knob, the woman's breath mingling with his. For a moment, he thought he heard applause from somewhere deep below, faint but real, as though the hotel had already decided the act was over. Adrian's hand clung to the doorknob of 302, as though the cold brass were the only thing keeping him tethered to the world he recognized. The woman in white stood where the corridor folded in on itself, patient, head tilted like a portrait awaiting its viewer. The air was swollen with the scent of lilac, cloying, medicinal, like something meant to mask decay rather than celebrate beauty. The door pulsed under his hand. It wasn't metaphorical. It throbbed, as if veins ran through the wood, carrying a rhythm that threatened to replace his own heartbeat. He realized he was unconsciously matching it, his chest rising and falling in cadence with the unseen pulse. He remembered moments of waiting, train stations at night, bus terminals emptied of voices, hospital chairs lined against sterile walls. Always the last to leave, always the one who lingered when movement had stopped. The hotel had studied that about him, had plucked it like a loose thread. His delays weren't mistakes, they had been auditions. The woman in white lowered her head. Her voice arrived without sound, the syllables stitched directly into his nerves. Time. The knob turned beneath his palm. The door opened by inches, spilling a pale light that was neither warm nor cold, but exact, like illumination in interrogation rooms, where every flaw is revealed and every denial shrivels. Inside, another hallway stretched forward. The carpet bore the same red and gold pattern, but wrong, the geometry over-sharp, repeating infinitely like a trap designed by obsession rather than architecture. At the far end sat a chair. Upon it waited a figure. Adrian leaned closer, stomach tightening. The figure was himself. Not the exhausted mirror echo he had glimpsed before, but something worse. Older, thinner, eyes cored out by a fatigue beyond years. This version of him stared without blinking, as though patience had calcified into permanence. The other Adrian's lips moved. The words did not reach him, but the silence that followed screamed louder than any voice. Knock! The sound erupted, not from the door, not from wood, but from inside him. A pounding on the cage of his chest, each beat demanding entry. He staggered, clutching his ribs. Knock! 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 The rhythm threaded through the walls, through the carpet, through the very bones of the hotel. The woman in white did not move, but her veil shifted as if stirred by the vibration. "Every story ends with a door," she said, though her lips remained shut. Adrian pressed his back against the wall. "I won't," he whispered. But even as he spoke, the knocking grew louder, aligning perfectly with his pulse. He realized he wasn't refusing, he was answering. The figure in the chair leaned forward. Its mouth opened, and though no sound escaped, Adrian knew the word that should have filled the silence. "Welcome." The hallway behind him had collapsed. The exit was erased. All that remained was the doorway, the waiting chair, and the woman's pale form. He felt the lilac claw into his lungs. It was not fragrance. It was breath forced upon him, breath not his own. He stumbled forward, one step over the threshold. The carpet gave underfoot like damp earth, the pattern stretching toward infinity. The chair at the end of the hall was now empty. "No," Adrian said, "not me. Knock." This time it came from the space ahead, echoing through the endless geometry. Another knock followed, then another and another until the sound rolled endlessly, as though every door in the unseen hotel had joined in chorus. He pressed his hands over his ears. Useless. The sound was inside him now. His heart had become the drum. The woman's presence thickened behind him, her veil brushing his shoulder though she had not moved. Her whisper slipped into him like a thread drawn through fabric. "Delay is permission. You delayed, you consented." The light ahead dimmed, the walls bent closer. The air grew thick with the weight of choice that was no longer his. The final knock came, so loud it seemed the ceiling would collapse. Yet it was not destruction, it was arrival. His lips moved before he knew what he said. The words belonged to someone else, or perhaps to the hotel itself, but they slid out in his voice. "I've arrived." The door widened, swallowing the rest of him in one breath. The corridor outside fell silent, emptied of scent, emptied of pulse. Only the brass knob glimmered faintly in the gloom, as though untouched. Somewhere far below, or perhaps inside the walls themselves, a bell chimed. Not once, twice, a slow measured toll. The sound of an elevator arriving for a passenger who no longer needed transport, and then silence. Was Adrian inside? Was he erased? Or had he been standing in that hallway all along, imagining the surrender? The hotel did not explain. The hotel did not need to, because for the next guest, the knock would come again.